The smell of pine and cinnamon filled the air as I pulled into my parents' driveway in Cedar Falls, Iowa, my 6-year-old daughter, Emma, bouncing excitedly in her car seat behind me. Snow covered the familiar ranch house where I'd grown up, and warm light spilled from every window, creating the perfect picture of a Midwestern Christmas. "Daddy, is Grandpa Frank going to be there?" Emma asked, her voice carrying that mix of curiosity and apprehension that had become too familiar whenever we discussed family gatherings. "Yes, sweetheart. Remember what we talked about? We stay close together, and if you feel uncomfortable, you come find me, okay?" "Okay, Daddy." Frank Morrison, my late wife Sarah's father, had been part of our Christmas tradition for the past 3 years since Sarah passed away from cancer. My parents insisted on including him, saying Emma needed her grandfather in her life, but every interaction with Frank left me feeling uneasy, like I was walking on eggshells around a man who seemed to view children as inconveniences rather than individuals. My name is Michael Thompson, and I teach 3rd grade at Cedar Falls Elementary. At 28, I'd found myself a widower and single father, trying to navigate parenthood while grieving my wife and maintaining relationships with both sides of our families. It wasn't easy, but Emma was my world, and I was determined to give her the love and stability she deserved. "Michael! Emma!" My mother, Linda Thompson, rushed out to greet us before we'd even made it to the front door. "We've been waiting for you. Come in, come in. It's freezing out here." The house was warm and filled with the sounds of family. My father's booming laugh from the living room, the clatter of dishes from the kitchen, and the excited chatter of cousins running around. Emma immediately perked up, her earlier apprehension forgotten, as she spotted her cousin Jake playing with new toys under the Christmas tree. "Can I go play, Daddy?" "Of course. But remember, stay where you can see me." "I know, Daddy." I watched her run off, her blonde pigtails bouncing, and felt the familiar tightness in my chest that came with letting her out of my direct sight. Since Sarah's death, I'd become hyper-vigilant about Emma's safety and well-being. Maybe too much so, according to my family. "Michael, you worry too much," my father, Robert Thompson, said, appearing beside me with a beer in hand. "She's fine. Kids need to run around and be kids." "I know, Dad, You hover." Sarah never hovered like that. The comparison stung, as it always did. My parents had loved Sarah, but they had a way of using her memory to criticize my parenting choices. According to them, I was too protective, too sensitive, too careful with Emma. "Where's Frank?" I asked, changing the subject. "Kitchen, helping your mother with dinner. He brought Emma a present, a dollhouse he made himself. Beautiful craftsmanship." Frank Morrison was a retired carpenter, a man in his 60s who believed children should be seen and not heard. He'd raised Sarah with an iron fist, something she'd spent years in therapy trying to overcome before she met me. But my parents saw only his practical skills and old-fashioned values, praising him as a real man who knew how to handle children. I found Frank in the kitchen, standing over my mother as she prepared the turkey. He was a tall, imposing man with graying hair and hands that looked like they could crush anything they held. When he saw me, his expression shifted to what I'd learned to recognize as his version of friendliness. "Michael, there you are. Where's my granddaughter?" "Playing with Jake in the living room." "Good. I brought her something special. Hand-carved dollhouse with furniture. Took me 3 months to make." "That's very thoughtful, Frank. She'll love it." "Course she will. Children appreciate quality workmanship when they see it, not like all this plastic junk they make nowadays." I nodded politely, but something in his tone bothered me. Frank had strong opinions about everything, especially when it came to how children should behave and what they should appreciate. Dinner was served family-style in the dining room, with all 12 of us crowded around the extended table. Emma sat between me and my Aunt Carol, chattering happily about school, her friends, and the Christmas pageant she'd been in the week before. And then Tommy forgot his line, so I whispered it to him, and he said it really loud, and everyone laughed. Emma giggled, her face animated as she told her story. "That was very kind of you to help your friend," Aunt Carol said, smiling at Emma's enthusiasm. "Emma's always been chatty," my mother added, "just like Sarah was at that age." "Too chatty, if you ask me," Frank muttered from across the table. The comment cut through the conversation like a knife. Emma's smile faltered, and she looked confused by the sudden change in atmosphere. "Frank," I said carefully, "Emma's just excited about Christmas. It's natural for kids to be talkative when they're happy. Happy or not, children need to learn when to speak and when to listen. In my day, kids didn't interrupt adult conversations with their chatter." "She wasn't interrupting," I replied, feeling my jaw tighten. "We were all listening to her story. Because you indulge her. Sarah never would have let her carry on like that at the dinner table." The mention of Sarah in that context made my blood pressure spike. Sarah loved hearing Emma's stories. She encouraged her to share her thoughts and feelings. Sarah was too soft. That's why Emma thinks she can talk whenever she wants, to whoever she wants about whatever pops into her head. Emma had gone quiet, sensing the tension, even if she didn't understand it. She looked between Frank and me with wide eyes, her 6-year-old mind trying to process why her grandfather sounded angry about her telling stories. Emma talks because she's intelligent and curious, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Those are good qualities in a child. Intelligence without discipline is just noise, Frank replied. Children need to learn respect. She is respectful. Daddy, Emma whispered, tugging on my sleeve. Can I tell Grandpa about my Christmas pageant? Maybe he'd like to hear about baby Jesus. Before I could respond, Frank's voice boomed across the table. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. We're having an adult conversation, and she thinks she can just interrupt with her stories. Frank, she's 6 years old, I said, my patience wearing thin. She doesn't understand that we're having a disagreement. She's just trying to share something she's excited about. Then it's time she learned. What happened next will be seared into my memory forever. Frank stood up from his chair, walked around the table to where Emma was sitting, and before I could react, he slapped her across the face. The sound echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. Emma's small hand flew to her cheek, her eyes immediately filling with tears. She looked up at Frank in shock, then at me, then around the table at the faces of her extended family. That, Frank said, looming over my daughter, is what happens when little girls don't know when to be quiet. You let her talk too much, Michael. Children need boundaries. I was frozen for a split second, my brain trying to process what had just happened. Then I heard it, the sound that would haunt me for months afterward. My parents were laughing, not full belly laughs, but chuckles and knowing smiles, as if Frank had just delivered a perfectly timed punchline instead of striking my child. Kids these days, my father said, shaking his head with amusement. Frank's right. They need to learn respect. Emma's fine, my mother added, as if my daughter's shocked tears were just an overreaction. A little discipline never hurt anyone. I looked at Emma, whose face was red where Frank's hand had connected, tears streaming down her cheeks as she sat in stunned silence. Then I looked around the table at my family, the people who were supposed to love and protect her, and saw nothing but approval for what had just happened. Something broke inside me in that moment. Not just my heart, but my faith in the people I'd trusted to be part of my daughter's life. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Emma, come here, sweetheart. She scrambled out of her chair and ran to me, wrapping herself around my legs and burying her face against my jeans. I could feel her small body trembling. Michael, sit down, my father said. Don't make a scene over a little correction. A little correction? I stared at him in disbelief. He hit my daughter, in the face. And you think that's funny? Frank was just teaching her some manners, my mother said. You're being too sensitive. Too sensitive? I picked Emma up, feeling her arms wrap around my neck like a lifeline. Someone just assaulted my 6-year-old child and I'm being too sensitive. Oh, come on, Michael, Frank said, sitting back down as if nothing had happened. It wasn't assault, it was parenting. Something you clearly don't know how to do. I looked around the table one more time, seeing the faces of people I'd loved and trusted my entire life. People who had just watched a grown man hit a small child and found it entertaining. We're leaving, I said. Michael, don't be ridiculous, my mother called as I headed for the door. It's Christmas. Emma's fine. You're overreacting. But Emma wasn't fine. I could feel her tears soaking through my shirt, could hear her quiet sniffles as she clung to me. She wasn't fine, and the people who were supposed to protect her thought it was a joke. I grabbed our coats and headed for the door, my daughter still in my arms. Michael, my father called after us, don't you dare walk out of this house over nothing. I stopped at the door and turned back to face the dining room full of my relatives. This isn't nothing, I said. This is everything. And then I carried my daughter out into the cold December night, away from the warm lights and Christmas cheer, away from the people who thought hurting children was acceptable entertainment. As I strapped Emma into her car seat, she finally spoke. Daddy, why did Grandpa Frank hit me? I was just trying to be nice. I knelt beside her car seat, looking into her confused, hurt eyes, and made a promise that would change everything. I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise you it will never happen again. The 20-minute drive home felt like the longest journey of my life. Emma had stopped crying, but she sat unusually quiet in her car seat, occasionally touching the red mark on her cheek that Frank's hand had left. In the rearview mirror, I could see her staring out the window with an expression that no 6-year-old should ever wear. The look of a child trying to understand why someone she was supposed to trust had hurt her. "Daddy," she said softly as we pulled into our driveway, "did I do something bad?" My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. "No, Emma, you didn't do anything bad. You were just being yourself, and that's exactly who you should be." "Then why did Grandpa Frank get mad at me?" I turned off the engine and sat in the silence of our garage, trying to find words that would make sense to a 6-year-old without destroying her faith in the world entirely. "Sometimes adults make very bad choices, sweetheart. Grandpa Frank made a bad choice tonight, and it wasn't your fault. But Grandpa Robert and Grandma Linda thought it was funny." The innocence in her voice when she said it made me want to scream. She was trying to reconcile the actions of people she loved with what she instinctively knew was wrong. How do you explain to a child that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you instead? I'm still figuring that out too, Emma. Inside our small house, I helped Emma into her pajamas and noticed her wincing when the fabric brushed against the side of her face. The red mark was darkening into what would probably be a bruise by morning, physical evidence of what my family had found so amusing. "Can we read 2 stories tonight?" Emma asked as I tucked her into bed. "Of course, sweetheart." "Which ones?" "The one about the brave princess and the one about the little girl who saves the forest." I smiled, despite everything. Even after being hurt, Emma gravitated toward stories about strong females who stood up for what was right. Maybe that was a sign that she'd be okay, that one terrible moment wouldn't define her spirit. As I read to her, I watched her face carefully. She seemed to be listening, but I could tell her mind was elsewhere, processing the evening's events in whatever way a 6-year-old mind processes betrayal and confusion. "Daddy," she said as I finished the second story, "are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's house for New Year's?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. New Year's Eve at my parents' house was another family tradition, one that Emma had been looking forward to for weeks. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. We'll talk about it later, okay?" "Okay. Will Grandpa Frank be there too?" "I don't know. I hope not," she whispered, and then turned over to face the wall. I sat by her bed until her breathing became deep and even, then went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of whiskey I rarely touched. My phone had been buzzing with texts all evening, but I hadn't looked at them. Now, sitting alone at my kitchen table, I finally read what my family had to say about our dramatic exit. "Mom, Michael, you're being ridiculous. Come back so we can talk about this like adults." "Dad, your daughter is fine. Stop being so dramatic. Frank was just trying to help." "Uncle Tom, heard you stormed out over nothing. Kids need discipline, Mike. Your generation is too soft." "Aunt Carol, hope you're both okay. Maybe we can talk tomorrow." The messages made me feel sick. With the exception of Aunt Carol, my family was completely unified in their belief that I was overreacting, that Frank's behavior was not only acceptable, but necessary. I called my best friend Jake Wilson, who lived 2 states away in Minnesota. Jake and I had been roommates in college, and he was one of the few people who knew the full story of my struggles as a single parent. "Mike, what's wrong? You sound terrible." "Jake, something happened tonight. I need to talk to someone who isn't completely insane." I told him everything: the dinner conversation, the slap, my parents' reaction, Emma's confusion and hurt. Jake listened without interrupting, occasionally making sounds of disbelief and anger. "Jesus Christ, Mike, he hit Emma and your parents laughed." I keep replaying it in my head, wondering if I'm losing my mind. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. You're not losing your mind. What Frank did was assault, plain and simple. The fact that your parents supported it is... I don't even have words. Emma keeps asking me why he did it, and I don't know what to tell her. You tell her the truth, that it was wrong, that it wasn't her fault, and that you'll protect her from it happening again. But how do I protect her from my own family? By setting boundaries. By making it clear that anyone who wants to be in Emma's life has to treat her with respect. If they can't do that, they don't get access to her. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about boundaries. The concept seemed simple in theory, but the reality was more complicated. These weren't strangers or acquaintances. They were my parents, my extended family, people who had been part of my life for 28 years. But they had also just demonstrated that they valued their relationship with Frank Morrison more than they valued my daughter's safety and dignity. I made myself a cup of coffee and opened my laptop. As a teacher, I had training in recognizing signs of child abuse and knew the resources available for families dealing with trauma. But I'd never imagined needing those resources for my own family situation. I spent the next 2 hours reading about child psychology, family dynamics, and the long-term effects of physical punishment on children. Everything I read confirmed what I already knew in my heart. What Frank had done was wrong, and the family's support of his actions was potentially even more damaging than the slap itself. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Michael, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "You embarrassed us tonight, walking out like that, making Frank look like some kind of monster. He was just trying to help Emma learn some manners." "Mom, he hit her. In the face. She's 6 years old. A little swat never hurt anyone. Your father and I were raised with much stricter discipline and we turned out fine. You turned out to think it's funny when grown men hit children. Don't be dramatic, Michael. We weren't laughing at Emma getting hurt. We were laughing at the situation. You getting so worked up over normal parenting." "Normal parenting? Mom, I'm a teacher. I'm legally required to report suspected child abuse. What Frank did tonight would be considered assault in my classroom. Your classroom isn't your family, Michael. Frank loves Emma. He's trying to help her become a well-behaved young lady." I felt my jaw clench. By hitting her? By teaching her respect, something she clearly needs to learn. The only thing Emma needs to learn is that the adults in her life will protect her, not hurt her. "Michael, you're being paranoid. Frank would never really hurt Emma. He's her grandfather." "He did hurt her, Mum. She has a bruise on her face. A little red mark that will be gone tomorrow. You're acting like he beat her with a belt." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with my mother alternating between minimizing Frank's actions and criticizing my parenting. By the time we hung up, I felt even more isolated and confused than before. I checked on Emma one more time before going to bed. She was sleeping fitfully, occasionally murmuring in her dreams. In the dim light from the hallway, I could see the dark mark on her cheek where Frank's hand had struck her. As I lay in my own bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about the choice I was facing. I could apologize, smooth things over, and pretend that tonight hadn't happened. I could continue to expose Emma to a family that thought hitting children was acceptable, hoping that Frank would control himself in the future. Or I could do what every instinct in my body was telling me to do. I could protect my daughter, even if it meant standing alone against everyone I'd ever trusted. The decision, when it came to me in the early hours of the morning, was surprisingly easy. I would choose Emma. Always and forever I would choose Emma, even if it meant losing everyone else. The next morning I called in sick to work, something I'd never done unless Emma or I were genuinely ill. But I needed time to think, to process what had happened and to figure out how to move forward. Emma woke up with a purple bruise blooming across her left cheek, and when she looked in the bathroom mirror, she started crying again. "Everyone at school is going to ask what happened," she said, touching the mark gently. "What do you want to tell them?" "I don't know." "Will you get in trouble if I tell the truth?" The question broke my heart. At 6 years old, she was already trying to protect me from the consequences of someone else's actions. "Emma, you should always tell the truth. If someone asks what happened, you can tell them that a grown-up hurt you and that it wasn't okay. But what if they ask who? Then you tell them. And if they want to talk to me about it, that's okay too." I called Emma's school to let them know she wouldn't be in that day, explaining that there had been a family incident and she needed some time to process. The school counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, immediately offered to speak with Emma when she returned. "Mr. Thompson, if there's been any kind of incident involving Emma's safety, we have resources available. Would you like to discuss this?" Yes, I think I would. I arranged to meet with Mrs. Rodriguez that afternoon, while Emma played at our neighbor's house. Mrs. Rodriguez had been the school counselor for 15 years and had a reputation for being both compassionate and direct. "Tell me what happened," she said when we sat down in her office. I told her everything, from the dinner conversation to the slap to my family's reaction. She listened without judgment, occasionally taking notes, her expression growing more concerned as the story unfolded. "Michael, what Frank did constitutes physical abuse. The fact that it happened in front of multiple adults who failed to intervene makes it even more serious. But it was just one slap. I mean, it's not like he beat her or... There's no just when it comes to hitting a child in the face. Emma is 6 years old, and an adult struck her for talking. That's abuse, regardless of the family dynamics involved." She was right, and hearing it stated so clearly by a professional helped validate what I'd been feeling. "What's even more concerning," Mrs. Rodriguez continued, "is your family's reaction. Emma is learning that the adults who are supposed to protect her think it's acceptable, even funny, when someone hurts her. That can cause long-lasting damage to her sense of safety and self-worth. What should I do?" "First, You need to establish clear boundaries about Emma's safety. Anyone who wants to be in her life needs to understand that physical punishment is not acceptable. Second, Emma might benefit from some counseling to help her process this experience. And if my family won't accept those boundaries, then you need to seriously consider limiting their access to Emma until they can demonstrate that they'll prioritize her well-being over their own preferences. That evening, I had dinner with my neighbor, Karen Martinez, who had been watching Emma. Karen was a single mother herself, with 2 teenagers, and had become something of a mentor to me since Sarah's death. "Mike, you look terrible. What's going on?" I told her about Christmas dinner, and her reaction was immediate and fierce. "He hit Emma? In the face? And your parents laughed? I keep wondering if I'm overreacting." "You're not overreacting. You're underreacting, if anything. If someone hit my kids, I'd have called the police." "The police? Mike, think about it. If a stranger hit Emma in a store for talking, what would you do?" "I'd call the police and press charges. So why is it different because Frank is family?" It was a good question, one that I'd been avoiding because the answer was uncomfortable. I'd been making excuses for Frank's behavior because he was Emma's grandfather, because my parents supported him, because confronting the truth meant acknowledging that my daughter wasn't safe with her own extended family. "Karen, what would you do in my situation?" "I'd protect my kids, period, no matter who I had to go up against." That night, after Emma was asleep, I called my brother David in Denver. David was 2 years older than me and had always been the family peacekeeper. I was hoping he might offer some perspective that could help me navigate the situation. "Mike, I heard about what happened at Christmas. Mom called me." "What did she tell you?" "That you had some kind of meltdown over Frank correcting Emma's behavior. She's really upset." I felt my heart sink. "David, Frank hit Emma. In the face. Hard enough to leave a bruise." "I know, Mom told me. But Mike, you have to understand, Frank comes from a different generation. He doesn't mean any harm. Intent doesn't matter when the result is a bruised 6-year-old. Look, I'm not saying what he did was right. But walking out on Christmas, refusing to answer Mom's calls, don't you think that's a bit extreme?" "Extreme? David, someone assaulted my daughter, and our parents thought it was funny. What's extreme is that I'm the only one who seems to think that's a problem." "Mike, you've been under a lot of stress since Sarah died. Maybe you're not seeing the situation clearly." The implication stung. "I think I'm having some kind of breakdown. I think you're a grieving single father who's maybe being overly protective of Emma. It's understandable, but..." "But what?" "But you can't isolate Emma from her family because of one incident." "One incident?" "David, this wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. Frank deliberately hit my child because she was talking, and our parents supported his action. That's not a single incident. That's a pattern of thinking that puts Emma in danger. You're making this bigger than it needs to be." After we hung up, I felt more alone than ever. Even my brother, who I'd hoped might understand, was minimizing what had happened and questioning my judgment. I spent the next few days researching family dynamics and child protection. I read about the cycle of abuse, about families that normalize violence, about children who grow up believing they deserve to be hurt by the people who claim to love them. I also reached out to other single parents in my community, including a support group that met weekly at the community center. When I shared my story, without using names, the response was unanimous. I needed to protect Emma, even if it meant going against my family. "My ex-husband used to hit our kids," shared Maria, a mother of 3. "When I finally left him, his family accused me of breaking up the family over normal discipline. But you know what? My kids are 10 times happier now that they don't live in fear. The hardest part," added Tom, whose ex-wife's family had been emotionally abusive, "is accepting that people you love can be toxic for your children. But once you accept that, the choice becomes clear." On Thursday, 3 days after Christmas, I made 2 important phone calls. The first was to a family therapist who specialized in childhood trauma. The second was to a lawyer who handled family law cases. The therapist, Dr. Jennifer Park, agreed to see Emma and me the following week. Children Emma's age are remarkably resilient, but they need to feel safe and supported in order to heal from traumatic experiences. The lawyer, Mark Stevens, was more direct. "If you're concerned about your daughter's safety around certain family members, you have every right to limit their access to her. Grandparents have no legal rights to visitation if the parent determines that contact is not in the child's best interest." "What if my family tries to claim I'm being an unfit parent?" "Based on what you've told me, you're doing exactly what a good parent should do, protecting your child from potential harm. Document everything. Keep records of your interactions and make sure Emma has professional support. No court would fault you for prioritizing your daughter's safety. That weekend, I sat Emma down for a serious conversation. Emma, I want you to know that what happened at Christmas was not okay. Grandpa Frank should never have hit you, and I'm sorry that happened. I know, Daddy. I also want you to know that I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. We might not see Grandma and Grandpa Thompson for a while, or Grandpa Frank, until they understand that hitting children is not acceptable. Emma looked sad, but also relieved. Does that mean I don't have to see Grandpa Frank anymore? Not until he learns how to treat children with respect. Good, she said simply. He scares me. That night I drafted a letter to my parents. It was the hardest thing I'd ever written, but it was necessary. I explained my position clearly. Frank Morrison would not have unsupervised access to Emma, and any future family gatherings would need to be Frank-free zones if they wanted us to attend. I also made it clear that anyone who wanted to be part of Emma's life needed to treat her with respect and kindness. Physical punishment, verbal abuse, and intimidation would not be tolerated. The letter ended with an ultimatum. They could choose to support these boundaries, or they could choose to lose access to their granddaughter. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a mixture of fear and relief. I was about to burn bridges with people I'd loved my entire life, but I was also about to give my daughter something invaluable, the knowledge that her father would always choose her safety and well-being over family politics and social expectations. It was time to find out what mattered more to my parents, their relationship with Frank Morrison or their relationship with their son and granddaughter. I mailed the letter on Monday morning, knowing it would reach my parents by Wednesday. Those 2 days felt like waiting for a bomb to explode. I went through the motions of teaching, helping Emma with her homework and maintaining our evening routines, but my mind was constantly focused on the confrontation I knew was coming. Emma started seeing Dr. Park on Tuesday afternoon. When I picked her up from the session, she seemed lighter somehow, more like her old self. Dr. Park says it's not my fault that Grandpa Frank hit me, Emma said as we drove home. That's right, sweetheart. It's not your fault at all. She also says you're being a good daddy by protecting me. I felt tears spring to my eyes. I'm trying to be, Emma. I know. I told her you're the best daddy in the whole world. Wednesday evening, my phone started ringing at exactly 6:17 p.m. I knew without looking that it was my mother, and I let it go to voicemail. She called back immediately. Then again, then again. By the fourth call, I decided to answer. Michael, we need to talk. Now. I'm listening, Mum. What is this letter supposed to mean? Are you threatening us? I'm not threatening anyone. I'm establishing boundaries for Emma's safety. Safety? Michael, Frank has never hurt Emma. He was just trying to teach her some manners. He hit her in the face, Mum. That's hurting her. It was a little correction, not abuse. And now you're saying he can't see his own granddaughter? That's cruel, Michael. What's cruel is letting someone hit your grandchild and thinking it's funny. We weren't laughing at Emma getting hurt. We were, oh, forget it. You're being completely unreasonable. Mom, I made my position clear in the letter. If you want to see Emma, you need to respect my rules about her safety. That means no Frank, and no one else who thinks hitting children is acceptable. So we have to choose between Frank and Emma? You have to choose between supporting someone who abuses children and having a relationship with your granddaughter. Yes, Frank doesn't abuse children. He's a good man who's trying to help raise Emma properly. Good men don't hit 6-year-olds for talking. The conversation continued in circles for another 20 minutes, with my mother alternating between anger, guilt-tripping, and attempts to minimize what had happened. Finally, she delivered her ultimatum. Michael, if you don't come to your senses about this, you're going to lose your entire family. Is that what you want? Mum, I'm not the one making that choice. I'm simply asking you to prioritize my daughter's safety. If that costs me my family, then maybe I need to find a better family. She hung up on me. An hour later, my father called. Michael, your mother is crying. She's been crying since she read your letter. What the hell is wrong with you? Dad, someone hit your granddaughter and you laughed about it. What the hell is wrong with you? Frank was trying to help. You're too soft with Emma, just like you were too soft with Sarah. The comment about Sarah made me see red. Don't you dare bring Sarah into this. Sarah would be ashamed of how you're acting. She would never have let you turn Emma against her grandfather. Sarah would have protected Emma from anyone who tried to hurt her, including Frank Morrison. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because unlike you and Mum, Sarah actually cared more about Emma's well-being than about keeping the peace with abusive relatives. Abusive? Jesus Christ, Michael, you've lost your mind. I've found my backbone. There's a difference. My father's voice turned cold. If you go through with this, don't expect us to be there for you when things get tough. Family loyalty goes both ways. You're right, Dad. It does. And right now, you're choosing Frank Morrison over your own granddaughter. What does that say about your family loyalty? Thursday brought a surprise call from Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. Michael, I heard about what happened at Christmas, and I wanted you to know that I support you completely. The words hit me like a lifeline. You do. What Frank did was wrong, and your parents' reaction was even worse. I've been thinking about this for days, and I can't stay silent anymore. Carol, I can't tell you how much it means to hear that. I have to tell you something, Michael. This isn't the first time Frank has been inappropriate with children. At Emma's birthday party last year, I saw him grab her arm hard enough to leave marks when she accidentally spilled juice on his shirt. My blood ran cold. Why didn't you say something? I should have. I was a coward. I didn't want to cause family drama. But after what happened at Christmas, I realized that staying quiet makes me complicit. Are there other incidents? I've seen him be rough with other kids at family gatherings. Nothing as blatant as what happened at Christmas, but he has a pattern of intimidating children when adults aren't paying attention. This revelation changed everything. It wasn't a single incident or a momentary lapse in judgment. Frank Morrison had a pattern of aggressive behavior toward children, and my family had been enabling it for years. Carol, would you be willing to talk to a therapist about what you've observed? Dr. Park wants to understand the full context of Emma's experiences with Frank. Absolutely. And Michael, I'm going to start speaking up when I see inappropriate behavior at family gatherings. I should have done it years ago. Friday afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at school. My principal, Mrs. Henderson, asked me to step into her office during my planning period. Michael, I received a phone call today that I need to discuss with you. My stomach dropped. What kind of phone call? Someone claiming to be Emma's grandfather called to express concerns about your mental state and your fitness as a parent. Frank Morrison called you? He didn't give his name, but he claimed that you've been acting erratically, making false accusations against family members, and potentially putting Emma in danger by isolating her from people who care about her. I felt my face flush with anger. Mrs. Henderson, I need you to know what really happened. I told her everything, including the consultation with Mrs. Rodriguez and our plan for Emma to receive counseling. Mrs. Henderson listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Michael, based on my observations, you're one of our most dedicated and level-headed teachers. Your response to this situation seems entirely appropriate for a parent protecting his child. Frank Morrison is trying to discredit me because I won't let him have access to Emma anymore. That's what it sounds like to me. I want you to know that I'll be documenting this call and our conversation. If anyone else contacts the school with concerns about your parenting, I'll refer them to this documentation. Saturday evening, Emma and I were making dinner together when my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see my parents' car in the driveway. Emma, go to your room and play quietly, okay? I need to talk to Grandma and Grandpa Thompson. Are they mad at us? They're confused about some things, but it's not your fault. Just stay in your room until I come get you. I opened the door to find both my parents on the doorstep, their expressions hard and determined. We're here to see Emma, my mother said without preamble. She's not available for visits right now. She's our granddaughter, my father said. You can't keep us from seeing her. Actually, I can, and I will until you're willing to respect the boundaries I've set for her safety. Michael, we've talked to Frank about what happened at Christmas, my mother said. He's sorry if his discipline was too harsh. He's willing to apologize to Emma. He's willing to apologize if his discipline was too harsh. Mum, do you hear yourself? He's sorry, Michael. Isn't that enough? No, it's not enough. Being sorry doesn't undo the trauma of hitting a 6-year-old, and it doesn't address the pattern of intimidating behavior that's been going on for years. What pattern? My father demanded. I told them what Aunt Carol had shared with me, watching their faces as they processed the information. My mother looked genuinely shocked, but my father's expression remained skeptical. Carol's always been dramatic, he said. She exaggerates everything. Dad, multiple people have witnessed Frank being inappropriate with children. This isn't about one bad moment. It's about a pattern of behavior that puts kids at risk. So what do you want from us? My mother asked. I want you to acknowledge that what happened was wrong. I want you to commit to never allowing Frank unsupervised access to Emma. And I want you to understand that if anyone hits my daughter again, they will never see her again. And if we can't agree to that, then you've made your choice. My parents looked at each other, having some silent communication that I couldn't interpret. "Michael," my mother said finally, "you're asking us to choose between Frank and Emma. I'm asking you to choose between supporting someone who abuses children and having a relationship with your granddaughter. Frank doesn't abuse children. Frank hit Emma in the face for talking. That's abuse. It was discipline. It was assault." We stood there in my doorway, three adults who shared decades of history, unable to find common ground on the most basic question, whether hitting a 6-year-old was acceptable. "We need to think about this," my mother said finally. "Take all the time you need, Mom, but understand that until you can commit to Emma's safety, she won't be available for visits." After they left, I sat in my living room, feeling the weight of what I'd just done. I'd essentially given my parents an ultimatum: choose Emma's safety or lose access to both of us. Emma emerged from her room and climbed onto my lap. "Daddy, are Grandma and Grandpa Thompson mad at me?" "No, sweetheart. They're not mad at you. They're confused about some grown-up things, but it's not your fault. Are we going to be okay?" I held her close, feeling her small body against mine, and made another promise. "Yes, Emma, we're going to be more than okay. We're going to be safe." 2 weeks passed without any word from my parents. Emma continued her sessions with Dr. Park, and I watched as my daughter slowly began to trust that she was safe to be herself again. The bruise on her cheek had faded, but the emotional healing was taking longer. "She's making excellent progress," Dr. Park told me after Emma's 4th session. "Children are remarkably resilient when they feel supported and protected. Emma knows you're in her corner, and that's giving her the security she needs to process this experience." "Has she talked about what happened?" "She's talked about feeling confused by the adults' reactions more than the physical pain. She said, 'Daddy was the only one who thought it was wrong.' That tells me she has a clear understanding of right and wrong, despite the mixed messages she received from other family members." "What about long-term effects? If you continue to prioritize her safety and emotional well-being, I don't anticipate any lasting trauma. The key is consistency. She needs to know that you'll always protect her, even when it's difficult." That evening, as I was helping Emma with her homework, my phone rang. It was my brother David. "Mike, I need to talk to you. Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow?" "I'm working tomorrow." "After work then. This is important." I agreed to meet him at the coffee shop downtown. David looked tired when I arrived, like he'd been losing sleep over something. "Mike, I've been thinking about our conversation after Christmas. I think I owe you an apology." "Okay." I called Aunt Carol to get her perspective on what happened. She told me about the other incidents with Frank that she's witnessed over the years. My heart rate picked up. "What did she tell you?" "That Frank has a pattern of being aggressive with kids when he thinks adults aren't watching. She said she's seen him grab children, speak harshly to them, and intimidate them into compliance." "And you believe her?" "I do. Carol's not dramatic, Mike. She's actually pretty reserved about family conflicts. If she's speaking up about this, it's because she's genuinely concerned." I felt a surge of relief. Another family member was finally seeing the truth about Frank Morrison. "David, I need you to know that I didn't want to create this division in our family, but I won't sacrifice Emma's safety to keep the peace. I understand that now, and I want you to know that I support you." "What about Mom and Dad?" David sighed. "They're struggling with this. They see Frank as a lonely old man who's part of our family, and they don't want to hurt him. But they also don't want to lose Emma." "They don't have to lose Emma. They just have to prioritize her safety." That's what I told them. I said that if you're asking them to choose between Frank and Emma, the choice should be obvious. "What did they say?" "Mom started crying. Dad got angry and said you were trying to control the family. But Mike, I think they're starting to understand that you're not going to back down on this." The next day I received a text from my mother. "Can we talk? Just the two of us?" I agreed to meet her at the park where Emma and I often played. My mother looked older than I remembered, more fragile somehow. "Michael, I've been doing a lot of thinking since Christmas. I'm listening. I talked to Carol about what she's observed with Frank over the years. I had no idea he was being rough with children when we weren't watching. Mom, the signs were there. You just didn't want to see them. You're right. I chose not to see them because it was easier to believe that Frank was just old-fashioned rather than problematic. And now? Now I understand that I failed Emma. I failed you. I let my desire to keep the peace override my responsibility to protect my granddaughter. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Mom, I just want Emma to be safe. I know, and I want that too. Michael, I'm willing to accept your conditions. No more Frank at family gatherings if Emma is going to be there. No unsupervised access. And if anyone ever hits Emma again, They'll have to deal with me. What about Dad? Your father is struggling with this. He sees it as you telling us how to run our family, but he's starting to understand that if he wants to see Emma, he needs to respect your rules. Mum, I need you to understand something. This isn't about control or punishment. It's about creating a safe environment for my daughter. I can't compromise on that. I understand, and Michael, I'm sorry I laughed that night. I'm sorry I didn't protect Emma. I'm sorry I made you feel like you were overreacting when you were just being a good father. That evening I called Emma into the living room for a conversation. Emma, I want to talk to you about Grandma and Grandpa Thompson. Are they still mad at us? They're not mad at us, sweetheart. They're learning some important things about keeping children safe. Grandma Thompson wants to see you again, but only if you feel comfortable with that. Will Grandpa Frank be there? No. If we visit Grandma and Grandpa Thompson, Grandpa Frank won't be there. Good. I don't want to see him anymore. You don't have to see him if you don't want to, not ever. What if he comes to our house? He won't. I promise you that. Okay. Can we see Grandma Thompson soon? I miss her. We'll see, sweetheart. We'll take it slow and make sure you feel safe. The following Sunday, my parents came to our house for dinner. It was the first time they'd seen Emma since Christmas, and the reunion was cautious but warm. My mother hugged Emma gently, and I could see tears in her eyes as she looked at my daughter. I missed you, Emma, she said softly. I missed you too, Grandma. My father was more reserved, but he made an effort to engage with Emma about school and her friends. At one point, he pulled me aside. Michael, I want you to know that I don't agree with how you've handled this situation, but I respect that you're Emma's father, and she's your responsibility. Dad, I'm not trying to control anyone. I'm just trying to protect my daughter. I know, and maybe I should have been more concerned about protecting her too. It wasn't the full acknowledgement I'd hoped for, but it was progress. Over the next few weeks, we slowly rebuilt our relationship with my parents. They visited our house regularly, always without Frank. They followed my rules about Emma's bedtime, her dietary restrictions, and her need for gentle discipline. Most importantly, they never again suggested that physical punishment was acceptable. One evening, as I was tucking Emma into bed, she asked me a question that made my heart swell with pride. Daddy, why did you fight with Grandma and Grandpa Thompson about me? Because I love you, and it's my job to keep you safe, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Will you always protect me? Always, Emma, no matter what. She smiled and closed her eyes, and I realized that this was what success looked like. Not a perfect family or a conflict-free life, but a child who knew without question that her father would always choose her safety over social expectations. A month later, I received a call from Frank Morrison himself. Michael, I think we need to talk. I don't think we do, Frank. I want to apologize for what happened at Christmas. I was wrong to hit Emma. Yes, you were. I'd like the chance to make it right. Maybe we could meet somewhere, and I could apologize to Emma directly. Frank, Emma doesn't want to see you. She's told me that repeatedly. She's just a child. She doesn't understand. She understands that you hit her for talking. She understands that you scared her, and she understands that she doesn't feel safe around you. Michael, I'm an old man. I made a mistake. Surely you can find it in your heart to forgive. This isn't about forgiveness, Frank. It's about Emma's safety and emotional well-being. She doesn't want to see you, and I won't force her to. So that's it? I'm just cut off from my granddaughter forever. You made that choice when you hit her. Actions have consequences, Frank. After I hung up, I felt a sense of finality. Frank Morrison would never again have the opportunity to hurt my daughter. The family dynamics had shifted permanently, and Emma was safer for it. That night I looked in on Emma as she slept peacefully in her bed. The scared, confused little girl from Christmas had been replaced by a confident child who knew she was loved and protected. I had chosen my daughter over family harmony, and it had been the right choice. 6 months after that terrible Christmas dinner, Emma and I were decorating our own Christmas tree in our living room. It was smaller than the grand tree at my parents' house, but it was ours, and every ornament had a story that belonged to just the two of us. Daddy, can we put the angel on top together? Emma asked, holding up the ceramic angel that had been Sarah's favorite. Of course, sweetheart. As I lifted Emma up to place the angel on the highest branch, I marveled at how much had changed. The little girl who had been slapped for talking too much was now chattering happily about her upcoming school Christmas pageant, her friends, and her excitement about our new holiday traditions. Tell me again about Christmas morning, she said as I set her down. Well, we'll wake up and open presents, just the two of us. Then we'll make pancakes shaped like Christmas trees. After that, we're going to volunteer at the community center, helping serve Christmas dinner to families who need it. And then we'll go to Aunt Carol's house for dinner. That's right, with Uncle David and his family and maybe some of our friends from school. Emma clapped her hands. I like our new Christmas better than the old one. Why is that? Because nobody's mean to me and I can talk as much as I want. The simplicity of her response broke my heart and filled it with joy at the same time. This was what childhood should look like. Safe, joyful and free from the fear of being hurt by the people who claim to love you. Dr. Park had been right about Emma's resilience. With consistent support and the security of knowing I would always protect her, she had bounced back from the trauma of Christmas with remarkable strength. Her last therapy session had been 3 weeks ago, and Dr. Park had declared her ready to graduate from counseling. Emma has developed excellent coping skills and a strong sense of self-worth, Dr. Park had told me. She knows that what happened to her was wrong, and she knows that she deserves to be treated with respect. Most importantly, she trusts that you'll continue to protect her. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something different but healthier. They visited regularly, always respecting the boundaries I'd established. My mother had become genuinely engaged with Emma's interests and activities, and my father, while still somewhat reserved about the whole situation, had learned to interact with Emma in ways that were gentle and encouraging. Michael, I want you to know that I see the difference in Emma, my mother had said during one of our visits. She's more confident, more talkative, more herself. I think you made the right choice, even though it was hard. Thanks, Mum. That means a lot to me. I also want you to know that I've been talking to other family members about appropriate ways to interact with children. What happened with Frank opened my eyes to some things I'd been ignoring. My father's acknowledgement had been less direct, but equally meaningful. Emma seems happy, he'd said simply during his last visit. That's what matters. The family gathering at Aunt Carol's house had become our new Christmas tradition. Carol had become something of a surrogate grandmother to Emma, and her children, Emma's teenage cousins, doted on her with the kind of protective affection that comes from understanding what she'd been through. Uncle Mike, my nephew Jake had said during our last visit, Emma told me about what happened at Christmas. I want you to know that I think you're awesome for protecting her. Thank you, Jake. That means a lot. My dad told me that sometimes doing the right thing means making hard choices. I think you made the right choice. David had become one of my strongest supporters, often telling me that watching me stand up for Emma had made him a better father to his own children. I used to think family loyalty meant never rocking the boat, he'd said. Now I understand that real family loyalty means protecting the most vulnerable members, even when it's uncomfortable. The support network I'd built extended beyond family. The single parents group at the community center had become a source of strength and wisdom. Karen Martinez, my neighbor, had become like a sister to me, often watching Emma when I needed to attend evening school events or parent meetings. You know what I love most about Emma now, Karen had said recently. She's not afraid to speak up for herself. She's learned that her voice matters, and that's a gift you've given her. The most unexpected source of support had come from my students' parents. Word had somehow spread about my situation, small towns being what they are, and several parents had approached me to express their admiration for my stance. Mr. Thompson, I heard about what you've been going through, one mother had said during parent-teacher conferences. I want you to know that I respect you for putting Emma's safety first. Too many parents sacrifice their children's well-being to keep peace with toxic family members. My principal, Mrs. Henderson, had also become an advocate. When Frank Morrison had called the school again, trying to claim that I was an unfit parent, she'd shut him down immediately. Mr. Morrison, I've documented your previous call and I'm documenting this one. Mr. Thompson is one of our most dedicated teachers, and from what I've observed, an exemplary parent. If you continue to harass him through his workplace, I'll be forced to involve law enforcement. Frank had never called again. On Christmas Eve, as Emma and I were reading stories by the fireplace, she asked me a question that showed how much she'd grown. Daddy, do you think Grandpa Frank knows that what he did was wrong? I think he probably does, sweetheart. But knowing something is wrong and being willing to change are two different things. Do you think he's sad that he can't see me anymore? He might be. But Emma, that's not your responsibility. It's not your job to make adults feel better about the consequences of their actions. I know. Dr. Park taught me that. She said that my job is just to be a kid and let you handle the grown-up stuff. That's exactly right. Daddy, I'm glad you're my daddy. Even when things are hard, you always protect me. I always will, Emma. That's a promise. Christmas morning was everything I'd hoped it would be. Emma woke up excited and happy, and we spent the morning opening presents, making our Christmas tree pancakes, and enjoying each other's company without any tension or fear. When we arrived at the community center to volunteer, Emma threw herself into helping serve meals to families in need. She chatted with the other volunteers, played with children whose parents were grateful for a hot meal, and showed the kind of empathy and confidence that comes from knowing you're safe and loved. "Your daughter is remarkable," said Mrs. Wilson, the community center director. "She has such a warm heart and such confidence in herself. You've raised a wonderful little girl." "Thank you. She's taught me as much as I've taught her." That evening at Aunt Carol's house, I watched Emma play with her cousins and interact with the adults who had chosen to be part of our new family structure. She was animated, talkative, and completely herself. The little girl who had been told she talked too much was now free to share her thoughts and feelings without fear. "Michael, can I talk to you for a minute?" Carol asked, pulling me aside. "Of course. I want you to know that watching you handle this situation has changed how I think about family dynamics. You showed me that sometimes love means setting boundaries, even when it's painful. It was painful, but it was also necessary. I've been thinking about other situations in our family where we've enabled bad behavior because it was easier than confronting it. I don't want to do that anymore." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'm going to start speaking up when I see adults treating children inappropriately. I'm going to prioritize the children's well-being over the adults' comfort. You've shown me that it's possible to do that without destroying everything." As the evening wound down and Emma fell asleep in my arms, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. 11 months ago, I'd been a single father trying to navigate family relationships while protecting my daughter from harm. I'd been afraid of conflict, afraid of isolation, afraid of making the wrong choice. Now I understood that the only wrong choice would have been to sacrifice Emma's safety for family harmony. Breaking the cycle of normalized abuse had been difficult, but it had also been liberating. Emma was growing up knowing that she deserved to be treated with respect, that her voice mattered, and that someone would always fight for her well-being. The next morning, I found a card that Emma had made for me while I was cleaning up the breakfast dishes. It was a drawing of the two of us holding hands with the words, "Best Daddy Ever," written in her careful 6-year-old handwriting. Below the drawing she'd written, "Thank you for keeping me safe. I love you." I sat at the kitchen table, holding that card and crying tears of gratitude. 11 months ago, Emma had been slapped for talking too much, and her extended family had found it amusing. Now she was thriving in an environment where her voice was valued and her safety was prioritized. I thought about Frank Morrison, probably spending Christmas alone, wondering why his actions had consequences. I thought about families who were still enabling abusive behavior because confronting it seemed too difficult. I thought about children who were learning that they deserved to be hurt by the people who claimed to love them. But mostly, I thought about Emma, sleeping peacefully in her bed, secure in the knowledge that her father would always choose her well-being over social expectations. That was the gift I'd given her, not just physical safety, but the understanding that she was worth protecting. As I tucked the card into my wallet, where I would carry it always, I made a mental note to call the Single Parents Group coordinator. I wanted to volunteer to mentor other parents who might be struggling with similar situations. If my experience could help even one child avoid what Emma had gone through, it would be worth sharing. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was my mother. "Michael, I wanted to thank you for including us in Emma's Christmas. She seemed so happy and confident. I can see how much she's grown." "Thanks, Mom. She's doing really well. I also wanted you to know that your father and I have been talking about other family situations where we might need to be more protective of children. You've opened our eyes to some things we'd been overlooking. That's good to hear. We're proud of you, Michael." It couldn't have been easy to stand up to all of us, but you did what was right for Emma. After we hung up, I felt a sense of completion. The family that had failed to protect Emma had learned to respect the boundaries I'd established. The people who had chosen to prioritize her safety were now part of our chosen family, and Emma herself had grown into a confident, happy child who knew she was loved and protected. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, Emma appeared in my doorway. "Daddy, I had a good dream about Christmas." "What was it about?" "It was about us. We were happy and we were safe and we were together." "That sounds like a perfect dream, sweetheart." It wasn't just a dream, though. It was real. She was right. We had built something real and lasting from the ashes of that terrible Christmas dinner. We had chosen safety over harmony, boundaries over enabling, and love over fear. Emma crawled into bed with me, And as she fell asleep in my arms, I made one final promise to myself and to her. I would never again let anyone hurt her in the name of family peace. I would continue to choose her well-being over social expectations, her safety over convenience, and her future over the comfort of others. Frank Morrison had slapped my child and said I let her talk too much. My parents had laughed. But Emma and I had the last laugh. We had each other, we had our safety, and we had the knowledge that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to tolerate the unacceptable. We had built new traditions, found new family, and created new definitions of what love actually looked like. And Emma could talk as much as she wanted.